people play the field way too much. Play the field in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to do these 4, 10, 15 things, whichever one works out for me, I'm going to go down that path. I don't know anybody that works. I don't know anybody who's done that successfully. Pick a lane, engage, go try it. Doesn't work, then go over to a new thing. Focus, put all your effort and energy and being into this thing that you're passionate about, that you like, that you can't stop thinking about.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the Habitual Growth Podcast. I've got a special friend and somebody I'm excited to introduce to you. This is actually can I say the hype man for Alteryx? Is that the appropriate term, Josh? Is that fine?
That could work. That could work.
Awesome. Well, Joshua Burkhow is the chief evangelist for Alteryx. He, and on his day-to-day, really helps analysts, managers, and executives turn data analytics and AI into real business value. You're a big thinker, Joshua. I know that. We've talked about that. We're going to dive into that a little bit more on the podcast here. But you're also a former U.S. Marine with leadership experience across a number of different verticals. But more than that, you speak, you write, and you move AI beyond just the hype into practical use for hopefully everyday users, but at least for organizations. That I do know. With that, what didn't I color? Add just a little bit of color to that for the audience, please.
Well, I think most people have figured out I'm not very great at sitting still for sure. So if you see me shift around, move around, that's completely normal. You sort of hit on it, but I'll sort of double down on it. I'm really fascinated, especially when it comes to AI technology, the field I'm in, the practical side of it. Like what actually like humans will be benefited by when this comes out. I can talk and go around all the hype and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's really like the stuff that saves people's lives, changes their careers, makes them closer to their friends and their family. All that sort of thing is really what gets me to wake up early and stay up late.
And is that something that you kind of fell into? Or has that always just been an interest for you? Obviously, AI is fairly new to most people. Big organizations like Alteryx, I'm sure, specifically in data analytics, it's been around for a while, but you seem to have found kind of your way into the forefront of a lot of these conversations. How'd you kind of get there?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny. I had various roles, but I sort of started in technical roles. I did some database work, did some analytics work for pretty well-known companies. But what I found was that I wasn't close enough to where the decisions were made. It was like I don't do well by just sort of hiding on the technical side, and then sort of we joke around, and back in the day that would just ship it over the wall to the business side, where they would take that data and make decisions. I had to obsess about, okay, what are they actually looking at with our data? What assumptions are they bringing in? What experience are they bringing to that? How are those decisions coming to life based on the data and the analytics and reports that myself or my team would build? And so what I found out of that sort of need to understand, I always I had 3, 4, 5 roles where I sat right in the middle. And that's where my sweet spot was, where I was technical enough to work with, Stanford PhDs and understand what they're trying to do. But also on the business side, understand why do you look at certain metrics? How does the business run based off of these decisions? Understand the mechanics of how a deal is made, how a product is created. All these things fascinated me. And so as I went, what I realized was there's not a lot of us in the world that are able to sort of straddle both and then communicate above that. Meaning, and it's sort of the depiction of my role today as chief evangelist is that I can get into the technical weeds enough to get the job done. I can understand what the business is trying to do and their goals and sort of strategy and approach to that. But a lot of times, even if you know these things, if they're not communicated clearly and effectively, if how many times does a CEO or a leader of a company get excited about the strategy, but nobody else is excited about it? They don't get it, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the sort of hype man, if you will, comes out of it. Is I find that stuff exciting, and I work really hard to try to share that, communicate it, say, hey, look, we want to go this direction. Here's why it could work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I'm glad you broke it down in that capacity because I've been a part of big organizations, Shell,
Hmm.
Marathon, Hewlett Packard as an example,
Yep.
and too often you see executives come in, especially if they're not located on site, if you're not at the
Yeah.
headquarters of that particular organization or that specific building, right? And you
Yeah.
see that person maybe once a quarter for the quarterly updates
That's
or
right.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
They come out and it's, hey, this is great plan. They're trying to get everybody hyped, and then everybody goes back to their cubicle or their desk, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, that was great, but I don't really see how I play into that vision.
That's right.
So, how much of this is intentional communication versus intentional, maybe from the employee side, seeking out more information to be clear on either expectations or what that bigger vision is?
There is sort of discipline and responsibility into each one of us figuring out how we create value. And
Mhm.
I balked for years at this idea. Executives would always use the word value, and we still do. Now, I'd like to think that I get it more because at the end of the day, how we provide that value, how we provide that sort of return for what we do is really important. And I
Mhm.
would even say, not to stir the pot too much, but I find a lot of people are sort of guided or misaligned with what their true value is to a company
Mhm.
versus what they think it is. It's a real hard thing. I only say this because I knew it myself was
Mhm.
that, sometimes you think that your value to a company is building the spreadsheet, operating this, one thing or pushing these buttons or whatever, when
Mhm.
maybe it's getting in front of people, communicating. Maybe it's how you think and your strategic mind. Maybe it's the fact that you are really good with numbers and seeing patterns, right? Like we all have these things that sometimes are not shining through because of this idea that we're not clear on it. So when going back to your question is there is responsibility in people sort of stepping up and saying, okay, I don't get this. I do not, I do this thing, XYZ, you're telling me we want to go this way. How do I connect the dots? It's the executive's job to get you aligned there.
Mhm.
They want you, they're the ones with the idea. They're the ones trying to lead the company. You can help the process, but you speaking up, the executive needs to align with you and say, you're this person. I need XYZ right here. Do you
Mhm.
understand? Bam.
Mhm.
And moving forward. I think it goes both ways, but it's one of those things that like communication has to be clean and clear, and progress will be made.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about the communication because I've seen you on the big stages. I've
Mm,
listened to some of your big talks, and I know you're an expert at that. But let's go back to what you said about the value of the individual, like maybe individual contributor,
mm,
maybe a middle manager, something like that. When you say, I recognize or sometimes I see that people are misaligned, they don't actually know what that value is that they add to the organization. One, how do you identify that you personally, Joshua? And
yeah.
then two, that almost sounds a little bit like purpose. And how does that person almost figure out what their value really is if it is different than just a spreadsheet or just managing a project?
Yeah. For me, it was sort of being brutally honest. I So part of it is I have I've been fortunate to be at some really well-known companies, a tiny little shoe company out of Beaverton, Oregon that everybody might know about, but I sort of dumbfounded by the opportunities that have come my way. Um and so a lot of it was I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to speak out. I didn't want to have an opinion. I didn't want to sort of make a fuss about something, even if I knew that that was a terrible idea inside. I'd just eat it. You know what I mean? Like I would just, and a lot of that, I think, I hate to say it, but I think age does something there that, like, you know, I have many more opportunities to say something, and I usually don't hesitate nowadays,
Yeah.
but I would say a bigger sort of push in this space wasn't just the age, but it was the fact that once I did it and I had positive results behind it, then I wasn't so afraid of sort of asking or outputting or saying, "Hey, we might want to think about this," or "Why are we doing this again?" Like all these sort of moments. Remind me of the second part of your question.
How does the person that like themselves. So that was you, but how does
Mhm.
the person, like let's say Nate Johnson is working, for
Yep.
Alteryx, how would I identify that, Nate, your work is bigger than just a spreadsheet or project management? Because sometimes,
Yeah.
a lot of our listeners, as an example, work for bigger companies, right?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
they may feel my part is this small and they don't have that direct interaction with an executive. So how do they know what that true value represents if they're not given that opportunity to express that, or just feel like, hey, there's something a little bit more here I should be doing or could be doing?
Yeah. Um, I think part of it, so a way to think about it is you got to be brutally honest with yourself. And I think this is an area that as a younger Joshua, I don't think I was. And if I'm being brutally honest now, is like I had to learn a lot about myself and learn about the qualities of how I think and how I react. I'm more impulsive than other people. I have a lot of traits where I'm really great at bright ideas in that regard, but I'm absolutely terrible on finishing a lot of things if I get bored, right? I get bored easily. Like getting to that point where I'm very honest about it, to the point that I can ask. This is probably the biggest thing here is in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I'm very transparent. Like, hey, did you find I literally say it almost like a bird, or did you find this valuable? Was
Mhm.
this valuable to you? Did you like this? And this is all the stuff that a lot of us don't do. I didn't do it for 20 years. And it's this putting yourself, that vulnerability of putting yourself out there and be like, hey, did you like it? Because there's only two pathways. Either they love it, maybe, if they're being honest with you, or they don't. And if
Yeah.
they don't, then I can improve. And so like
Mhm.
when I got clear on that, so someone would be like, "Oh, I really loved it, but you stuttered the whole way through it." I don't know, some making stuff up, but like you could have improved this. Maybe you didn't look into the camera. Maybe you said this too many times. You did this too many times. You didn't say this. Whatever. Those are all things that essentially will make you better the next time. And I mean, it's once you see that pathway, like you're literally only bound to go straight up because each interaction, each effort you make, each time on stage, each presentation you make, every time you talk to an executive gets better and better and better each time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that you got to get past this idea that you're expected to know, that
Yeah.
that like the executive wouldn't or the team lead wouldn't have hired you if you didn't know everything.
Mhm.
It's complete BS. Like you got
Yeah.
to get up there and be like, okay, I'm doing XYZ. Is that valuable? Is that what you want? And they will say, yeah, X and Y is great. Didn't don't need Z. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Now I'm going to do X and Y and you know another Y, whatever.
Yeah.
Like I'm some other thing that now I've gone from not being as productive, as valuable, as needed in an organization to being valued and validated, meaning
Yeah.
someone has validated that yes, you're doing all the things that I need you to do,
Yeah.
right?
I love that take. It's making me think. So when I was in my, I want to say probably late 20s, right? I started working at Hewlett Packard and got into a couple of rooms with executives, right? I
Mm,
had gotten a couple of promotions or whatever, and it's a scary time, right? When you first speak up,
sure.
especially to somebody who's an executive, you don't really see them all the time, you don't know how they
Yeah,
act. But I had to go through that learning, and I think everybody who's doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor or the CEO of the company, right? There's always, you're a person, you're always trying to learn something.
yeah,
And it made me realize everybody who's around those tables is there for a reason, right? They're not just
sure.
letting some random person come in, which means you have value to some degree, whether you believe it or not. So
Yep,
your feedback, your thoughts, your vocality does have a big impact on those decisions, but it is hard for people to step up
yeah,
and make decisions and participate sometimes, even if it's just a comment.
yep,
So I do agree. Like I was having this conversation with my wife actually yesterday. I do think
mm,
it's an age thing. I'm in
yeah,
my 40s now. I'm starting to mature a little bit. But I also think it's a growth period. And when you start to make those decisions of, hey, I'm not just going to sit on the sidelines, I'm actually going to start getting in the game. If I'm going to be in the room, I'm
sure.
going to be in the room, right? I'm going to
Yep,
listen. I'm going to be
engage.
articulate. I'm going to try to do my best. Doesn't
That's
mean I'm
right,
going to fail, or sorry, it doesn't mean I'm not going to fail.
right.
You're never always going to succeed, but it does mean you're a person, you're there for a reason, you have to take
That's right.
ownership of that. And so
Yeah.
how much of this How much of this in the people that you coach, in the teams that you're running or the teams that you're speaking with, do you see people getting excited and wanting to come out of their shells versus how much do you actually have to, as a leader, start probing them for more answers and interaction?
Yeah. I actually have found myself having that conversation more often is that I feel like, the folks might disagree with this, but in my experience, that the only thing holding people back is their own self-talk, their own
Yes.
mental sort of mindset that they have and the beliefs that they go around it, that they believe that they don't belong in that room, even though the CEO called you in there, right? Someone
Yeah.
who's more qualified to tell you whether you should be in that room or not, but you'll talk yourself out of it.
Yeah.
Your spouse or your friends will, oh yeah, you don't fit into that dress, you don't do this thing well, you don't do that thing well, like any of these things where we don't make up our own minds. Like
Mhm.
I know I can't sit still, but man, if I'm not obsessed about a topic, like
Yeah.
there's nobody more obsessed about Alteryx than I am. You know what I mean? Like these are things where it's not bragging, it's
Mhm.
how I feel about the situation and being sort of authentically engaged with that. I think the other thing is that people, this is something that I feel like I'm still sort of learning, but at least understand now, is people play the field way too much. Play the field in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to do these 4, 10, 15 things, whichever one works out for me, I'm going to go down that path. I don't know anybody that works. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody who's done that successfully. Pick a lane, engage, go try it. Doesn't work, then go over to a new thing. Focus, put all your effort and energy and being into this thing that you're passionate about, that you like, that you can't stop thinking about. Do that thing. Stop playing the field. Stop trying to be good on 15 different levels, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody Michael Jordan couldn't make it in baseball, but man, he was great in basketball,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing. It's that engagement and being all in.
Joshua, you're not going to believe this, but I know you're talking to me because this is the interview. But at the same time, you are talking to me because last night I couldn't sleep. This is a true
Mhm,
story. So last night I couldn't sleep, and I got up at I think like 4:45 this morning, and I was
mhm,
just trying. I was like, "Why am I not sleeping? What's going on?" And I just have these open loops. And there's an organization that
mhm.
I had kind of been engaged with, but kind of not. And I just
Yeah,
was like, I don't see myself moving forward with this. It's just a distraction. They're like, I can't pour what I need to pour into these other things like habitual growth if I'm over here. And it was
yeah,
just this open loop. And it had been an open loop for me for 2 weeks. And so this morning I got up and I just wrote the CEO and I was like, I'm sorry, thank you for the opportunity, but this isn't going to work out
make
for
it
me
work.
right now. I got to stay focused. And
That's
that
awesome.
was just a perfect statement because I think a lot of us do exactly that. Sounds great. I'm going to put a few hours here and a few hours there. And pretty soon you're not focused on anything. You're just completely
No,
distracted. And so
yeah,
focus means so much when it comes to execution and productivity, but also just real understanding. And I think, at the end of it, like influence, like you have, what you're doing for Ultrix, like I'm all in on this. Like if I don't
yeah,
believe this, I can't motivate people to do the same thing.
that's right. And there's all sorts of things that happen when you do that. There is probably hopefully a small percentage, but there's probably people at Alteryx, outside Alteryx, that think I'm nuts, that think I'm crazy. They think like, okay, this guy has drinking the Kool-Aid and he can't stop. Totally fine. Good.
Mhm.
Good for them. Have whatever sort of opinions you want. That's their world, not mine. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm here having the time of my life, right? And it's but I think as you know this too, but like we use, especially in self-development, we use words like focus as a sort of carte blanche meaning to everything. But if you think about it, the focus that I'm talking about is more aligned with the idea of obsessing and obsession, right?
Mhm.
If you look at, you know, there's all these stories of the 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are obsessed with something and they start a business and they're multimillionaires and sometimes billionaires before they're, 25.
Mhm.
And there's more and more of those stories because of social media. But if you dissect it and you break it down and look into it, you're gonna see that they're maniacal about that one thing. They've done that thing better than you know 99.99% of the population, where
Yeah.
they've gotten in there and they're hyper obsessed about that one. They don't care, you know about the shiny car, the glitz and glamour, the fact that they're, the richest person or richest person under 30, whatever. Any of those sort of accolades or
Yeah.
sort of goalposts, doesn't matter. They're doing that thing. They're obsessed about building that app, about building that company, about getting to that outcome. And so you have, my point here is you have this perfect example of what happens when you do it.
Mhm.
Yet you go on social media and they're like, oh no, you gotta diversify and you gotta do all these 15 different things well. And well, you can only be a CEO if you can do these 80 things upside down, drinking water, bouncing on your head sort of thing. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Insurmountable sort of ideas. And it's sort of, I mean, it's ridiculous for sure, but it's sort of like when I started paying attention to those ideas that made sense and I could replicate
Mhm.
versus, hey, wake up at 4 a.m. and be at the gym and work out for 12 hours and then go, do your job for 12 hours. It's just like the ridiculousness of it. Once I
Yeah.
started sort of letting that go and just taking one thing that works, implementing, and then move on to the next thing, amazing what happens. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just adding to that, I think, as I've gotten older, right, I've actually considerably shrunk the circle of people I take influence from, people that are in my
Yeah.
own network, whether that's in an organization or out. And a perfect example of that is using the word focus. Alex Ramosi is really big on this, but Alex
Yep.
is very transparent about his journey. And yes, he is a
Absolutely.
person who will say you do have to get up early and you do have to put in the work, but his
Yep.
important message, at least one of my bigger takeaways, is like you just have to get through, like, convince yourself that you can be good at the monotonous, right? It's like
Yep.
everybody has a big shiny object and they like to be distracted, but that's where you lose focus. When you get into the habit of, hey, these are just the things I'm going to do because I'm obsessive with this business. It doesn't mean
That's
you're
right.
drinking the Kool-Aid 24/7. You still have a life, you still have social, you know, um, social events, you still have relationships and those types of things, but we don't realize how oftentimes we are distracted. And in fact, another example, the reason I actually resigned from that role with this other company that I mentioned today was a friend of mine, Ryan Stewman,
Mhm.
he's becoming a personality on social media right now. But one of the things that he made a post about was he's like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And what he said was, when I'm on social media, he was like, I'm making 3,000 posts a month, and it's not just a post, but it's engagement. I'm going to comment on people.
Mhm.
I'm going to respond back to them. I'm going to DM that. And I was like, well, here I am trying to, grow my own profile, like trying to
Yeah.
get people interested in businesses, and it's maybe like once or twice a day. And it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
3,000 versus, maybe 10, right? You can
Right.
see that difference of like when people get obsessed with it, uh, how deep it really goes and what you
Yeah.
can do. And I think that's the cool part of just raising that level for yourself. Like we talk about
Yeah.
personal development, it becomes, this is kind of how it works, right? This
That's
is what
right.
the elite levels are doing.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up Alex because I'm a huge fan as well. He's the one that sort of gives an example where track your day, 15-minute increments, write down every 15 minutes, have the alarm go off, write down exactly what you did in
Hmm.
that 15 minutes. Do that for like he said a couple weeks, I think, if I remember
Yep.
correctly. But he's like, you will be astounded at what you do and the level of productivity that comes out of that because most people will say out of one side of their mouth that they're focused on something, but their actions, their habits, their behavior shows a very different story. And this is
Yep.
one of the areas that I always thought myself a little neurotic, but like this is one of those ideas I hinted at, like it makes perfect sense. I write down stuff. I like, any methods where I'm keeping track of stuff and I write it down and I say, okay, what am I going to do this hour? Okay, I'm going to do these four things, whatever.
Hmm.
And I put it down and I see, did I get those? No, I got distracted. You know, one day too much sugar, too much coffee, something. I got a phone call, too distracted. Bam. Okay, look, now I know. Now I have more awareness of what's going on.
Yeah.
Put the next hour, I write these four things. Man, I did those plus two more. Well, I was hydrated. I'd worked out this morning. Feel good. Had great conversations with friends and family and partner and stuff like that.
Mm.
This is interesting, And you start to put down this sort of science behind all this, and just become more aware. And when
Mm.
you are, it's that sort of it's along the lines of that brutal honesty. Is you're actually seeing the world as it operates for you specifically, not according to what you, me, or anybody on this social media dictates you need to do.
That's right. Yeah. And I know you're not a habitual growth user yet. But actually this is the whole premise behind the design.
Is that what this
Because
is all about? Just that's
just big
awesome.
sales pitch.
That's good.
But
I'm here
that's the
for it.
whole pitch of the business. I mean, really it is,
Mm,
you have a certain number of things, what we call essential actions, 5 to 10 max. So you're
okay,
not spreading yourself too thin. You're just highly focused. I'm going to get these 5 things done today.
perfect.
And you're not tracking in 15-minute increments, but the whole point is you understand whether or not you're moving things forward or not. And if you are committing to certain things on a daily basis and then you're not doing them, the data doesn't lie, right?
That's right.
That means you need to go back to the root cause. Did I drink too much coffee? Did I sleep in?
Mm. Do I
Do I not
sleep
believe that I
enough?
can do these
Yeah,
certain things? Yeah.
that's right.
Exactly. It's providing that data for yourself, right? For nobody else, for yourself to say,
Yeah,
am I really growing in the ways that I want to? And then what we do is we actually allow people to attach goals to those essential actions. So eventually you're working towards your goal. But
yeah.
how much do you think now that you're at the position that you're at, you see thousands, if not more, tens of thousands of people in these major corporations all over the world. Do you think people are intentionally distracting themselves and that's why they don't have focus? Or do you think it is just because they're afraid almost to get more obsessive, let's use that
Yeah.
term, with the things that they're actually working on?
I think if you pin me to the floor today, come back 10 years from now, I might understand the world a little more different. I know it through my experience that I had a lot of fear. What are they going to say? What are they going to think? What are they, am I going to be fired? Name your pick of all the
Mhm.
sort of negative self-talk. And what I think a majority of people, at least in my experience, my conversations, is that they're afraid of the potential outcome, which is mind blowing if you think about it, because it's never happened. It
Yeah.
hasn't even happened yet. And so they're making projections because that's sort of how our brain works, is that we sort of have to think two, three, four steps ahead of the game to try to predict our safety. It's sort of a
Hmm.
natural thing from way back in history. But many times we're wrong. Many
Yeah.
times we're making those projections not based off of what you were saying, the factual data. Like, this is maybe the biggest aha moment I've had in my whole life, is that a lot of people have opinions, including myself. A lot of opinions are wrong. And the majority of the reasons that opinions are wrong is because they never looked at the data. When I was growing up and I was younger and I was struggling, I never looked at that data and operated from that mindset.
Hmm.
Now I can get on a stage in front of 2,000 people and joke around the fact that I have a very short attention span, that I need help getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Like, thank my podcast host or podcast manager. She's freaking amazing because, like, she keeps me together. I often get picked on to say that I need a handler. Like, I can get it's wild though, because I can do so much, and I've
Mm.
been able to do a lot. But I'm also very, like, open and clear, like, hey, I'm really good in these areas. I'm pretty terrible in these areas. And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like tattoo them on my arm, but I also don't like shy away from them either.
Yeah.
Like, if someone, for example, if I ever got asked to manage a project, that would be a terrible idea, because all that sort of manipulation of tons of detail and keeping stuff on track, all that is not a strength.
Yeah. Understood.
And so now I'm just very, blatantly honest, brutally honest about that. That's not my strength. That's not what I'm made for. That's not what I like doing. Right.
Yeah.
And no one disagrees with that now, because they know, right?
Yeah.
That, at least in my world. And it's this sort of, like, brutal honesty is probably where it all sums up to, is that yes, it's fear. It is scary to sort of think that, hey, perfect example, a lot of people would love to give a talk and get on stage and deliver something that's sort of exciting, like it is being, a front man or front woman to a band. But they never do it because they project that, everybody's going to boo them, or everybody's going to, throw something at them or whatever. And it's not based on reality. Like, it's
Yeah.
not a real thing.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I'm going to totally butcher this, but it reminds me of the saying, which is, you spend your 20s and 30s trying to prove yourself to other people, only to get to your 40s and 50s not caring what they think, to finally
That's
get
right.
to your 70s and 80s and realizing nobody cared about you in the first place. Right. And
That's
it's
yeah.
like, and that it's like, if you just hear that and skip to the 80s and you're like, you're just a person on stage, right? You're a guy that's up
Right.
there for 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, right? Doing the
Mhm.
best that you can. You're not perfect, but you're going to give it your best shot. You're learning along the way, and then they're going to forget about you anyways and move on to whatever they have going on in their next life. And it's, to me, it's that brutal juxtaposition of like, man, I've got to deliver because everybody's going to be thinking about me and this is going to be burned in their life for, in their minds for the rest of life too. Yeah, nobody's really going to care. Like, who
Nobody,
cares if you
yeah.
flub? You're right. They realize you're a person and then they're going
Yep.
to move on with their life and deal with the other
Yeah.
stuff they have going on.
But it's
And that, but
exactly that. It's your dichotomy of how you're talking to yourself, right?
yeah,
None of the rest matters. Like, people don't right now, there's, I don't know, 2, 3, 4,000 people at Alteryx. Maybe one person is thinking about me right now. Maybe. A whole bunch of people are not. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like, no one's going through the world thinking day in, day out about you, and it's sort of, I get it. It sounds like, "Oh, that's kinda bad." No,
yeah.
that's we're all in that game. Like, no one's thinking about all these other people, and it's we gotta sort of confront reality, deal with it as it is, and then and move on.
Yeah, 100%. I want to actually go back to your background because I'd like to
Mm,
contextualize maybe kind of how you got to this point, how you make decisions. I believe some of this really is maturity. I think some of his age and experience. And you have
mhm,
obviously gotten over that self reflection, not caring, that's not the right word, but basically like you're willing to take risks because you know
yeah,
who you are. You're confident in yourself. You've
yeah,
got a background in the military. How
yeah.
has that helped kind of shape your approach to discipline, to decision making, and really leadership when it comes to civilian work in organizations like Alteryx?
How long do we have for this podcast? In so many ways, like an onion that I'm still, after so many years, I think I've been out 22 years or something, like, like, new ways all the time. There's the obvious ones, is just the order and the discipline and all these things, and those
Mhm.
are skills that, frankly, if you were raised like me, and I didn't have a whole lot of structure growing up, I didn't have a father figure, I didn't have these things that, sort of set the pace for those, that, like, you
Mhm.
get into school and you need to study, most good study habits, and getting through school and getting a job and good work habits, work ethic, all those things are sort of built up in, for some people, they're an uphill climb. For others, they're sort of part of how they were raised, right?
Yeah.
And so the military was this sort of wild moment, because before, like, again, couldn't sit still to save my life. Most common, teachers would always be the ones to be like, you know what? I don't get this kid. He's like super smart. He understands really complex ideas and thoughts, and he's super creative. Couldn't get homework done to save his life. He's like, never, he's always fidgeting, all this. And so there was this dichotomy where I was like, oh, guess I'm just messed up, right? Guess I'm, just this or that, any sort of naming that I could put on myself.
Mhm.
And I was always a happy-go-lucky kid, but, like, when I something shifted, because when I went to senior year, I had the conversation with the counselor. I said, "Hey, I obviously am not gonna be a great college student, not because I don't want to." I mean, I had fantasies of going to MIT or Notre Dame or some of these top
Yeah.
schools at the time. It wasn't for the lack of sort of that idea of it, but I just knew myself enough to know that I wouldn't succeed. And so looking at options like, "Oh, the military." I sort of got influenced. My uncle's a Navy SEAL. It was a Navy SEAL. And so I was like, okay, I can't, like, I do not want to come back from whatever I go into. Like, no offense, I love my brothers in the Air Force, but I couldn't go to the Air Force and come back to my uncle and be like, yeah, good, went to the Air Force.
Yeah.
And I was like, the Navy SEAL scared the shit out of me. Like, just to be very transparent, those guys are intense. And so I got to a point, I was like, oh, well, the Marines, they're the crazy ones. I'll go there. All of that to be said, that, like, the moment that I went to boot camp, and I got in there and I'm like, okay, they're yelling and screaming. What are they yelling and screaming about? Oh, they just want me to do this thing. All right, I'll just, almost like, it sounds so silly, but it's almost that Forrest Gump sort of approach. Like, I'll do whatever you tell me to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I just went in there, and wouldn't you know, like, the structure, the organization, the sort of systematized perspective of how they run a military organization, even the the sort of structured approach to leadership, like all clicked. And I just, man, I just went. It was everything that I needed to go as fast as I could. And I got meritoriously promoted. I got Marine of the Year. I got put on some prestigious duties that very few get to do. And it was just the environment. It was the fact that I was working in an environment that was clean, clear, and easy to move forward. They're like, run that way as fast as you can. All right, I'm on it. Let's go. No?
Do you feel like that inhibited your creative abilities? I feel like now with kind of what you just shared a little bit earlier, and you are 22 years separated, as you mentioned. So
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
there's a grace period in here. But did you
yeah,
feel like that inhibited you in any sort of way other than
yeah.
point you in the right direction, focus your energy towards basically what needed to get done at the time? And how did that impact maybe your career growth getting out of the military?
Yeah. Um, I think what happens actually is I wish I had a good quote behind this, but if you look at like mathematics, for example, or science in general, it's a very structured thing. But look at what has come out of science, and the magic that they can explain. There's phenomenon that like is beautiful in the world. They can, I love plants, and they can explain how that works from a scientific point of view, which is highly structured. It's
Mhm.
a highly mathematical, framework, if you will, that leads to these sort of creative outcomes. And I sort of think of it that way, that I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So a lot of my creativity comes from a sort of structured approach of it. And this idea that I don't just randomly sort of go out and just start doing things. I sort of have lay a foundation, a structure, and say, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? How long? How tall? How wide? That sort of thing. And then, a lot of my talks, I try to bring creativity to it. I try to bring humor and a new perspective, and
Yeah.
sort of how do I look at this from a different way, a different view, and try to make something that connects with people more.
Yeah. I love that answer. I mean you do a very good job at it. And this kind of parlays maybe not so much your background, but almost the shifting of mindset. Because you mentioned this during one of our first conversations, and that was just how you can like flip into presenter mode. You're now
Yeah.
running your own podcast as an example, right? That's a
Mhm.
you can be having a conversation and then all of a sudden you get in front of a camera, you gotta like turn it on. So
Yeah, yeah.
how do you number one prepare for your long presentations, right? How do
Yeah.
you get that excitement on? And then what goes through your mind when you actually get on stage or get on a podcast and really have to start turning up that energy to
Yeah.
get people excited about what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's a lot there, so you probably have to bring me back. Let's talk about the preparation and then what happens on stage, because I sort of have some aha moments in there. Preparation is actually another callback to the idea that you can be creative and still practice it a thousand
Mhm.
times. So I actually disagree. There's a sort of belief system that goes around with speakers around, I don't want to practice too much because then I sound robotic. It's complete BS. It's those are people that haven't tried or are willing to put in the time and effort and energy. And I'm not trying to be sort of confrontational about it, but like try it first before you talk, because all the best speakers that I've talked to or I've seen will tell you that they have rehearsed it so much that they could cite it backwards in their sleep, and get to a point where it is second nature to what they when they talk about it.
Mhm.
That's where you need to get. I used to tell coworkers it's 100 times. It's a fictitious number, but 100 times is way more than enough times to get it memorized, but it's also enough times to get it to where you couldn't forget it if you tried. And if you think about that, it makes perfect sense, because if you're able to do that and you get it to, I don't know, 100 times, 80 times, whatever, and you go on stage and you're scared and you're shaking and you're nervous, this thing is planted in your head. You couldn't forget it. Even through all that nervousness, through all that fear, through all that, you still would be able to get it out. And it's like
Mhm.
it's overcome that sort of hurdle. And I can't for the life of me remember where I heard this, but it was really transformational for me. I've always been a pretty high energy person, sort of naturally caffeinated, if you will. And so the energy part wasn't my challenge. I recognize it's, others' challenge, but not mine. But when I originally started getting on stage and I'd start to speak to larger and larger audiences, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, I was very in tune with what was going on. Like, it's something, like, when you meet like, you run into someone famous, or you meet someone of significance to you. Sometimes it's a CEO, sometimes it's a rock star, sometimes it's, you know, someone you idolize. Your body goes through this sort of physiological shift. You shake, you tense up, you might get dry in the mouth, all kinds of things. And people have a variety of physiological sort of responses. And I was always very like, hey, I was getting on stage, like, whoa, this is weird. I'm not like, I feel this, like I can
Yeah.
feel it in my body, but I never could figure it out. And the aha moment came when someone, I want to say Tony Robbins said this, but maybe I'm making this up. Somebody said that your body, your brain doesn't know the difference between excitement and fear, and you can choose. And I
Oh,
was like,
interesting.
mind blown, because it's easy for me to be excited. It's easy. That's the game. I'm naturally in that spot.
Yeah.
The very next time I remember, I was at one of big corporate, company conference for Alteryx. That next time I sort of wrapped around my head that I am more than excited to do this. And it's sort of the mouse wheel in my head of repeating it and stating it and putting it into words, but literally getting my head wrapped around this idea that I wasn't scared. My
Yeah.
response, my physiological response in my body was pure excitement, because
Mm.
I felt excitement before, right? And wouldn't you know, I went out and I killed it, and I got a raving response back. It was probably, by far the best that I had had at the time, and it felt amazing. My head was clear. I was able to get the words and the message and the presentation out that in the way that I expected to. All the, sort of stars aligned at that moment. And it was this simple shift that I understood. And so now that people tell me, like, oh my gosh, I have stage fright, I couldn't go, like, I just want to sort of grab them, like, try this, just try
Yeah.
doing this, because I don't think it'll work for everybody, but man, it's so cool that it worked for me.
Yeah, that is incredible. Actually, I haven't heard that before. That's going to be one of the things that stick with me, because you oftentimes hear the statements where people almost try to calm themselves down, right? Instead of
Right.
embracing that emotion, right? I
Yeah,
loved
yeah.
what you said, because you said it's either going to be fear or it's going to be excitement. I'm gonna choose
Truth.
to see that this is excitement, not fear. So I'm gonna lean into it a little bit more
That's
versus
right.
most people that I think identify with the fear and try to calm themselves down. And therefore that reduces their energy. They try not to make a mistake instead of leaning into that other thing. And I think that's incredibly powerful that you can use whether you're on a stage in front of a few thousand or leading a business meeting or just having a
That's right.
conversation with one other person. Like, you get to choose how you get to lean in or what emotion you lean into.
Yeah. I think it's, a lot of self-help books and material is sort of in a roundabout way trying to get to that idea, trying to get to the fact that you just need to lean into it, but recognize it's a different thing. I think, you know, years have passed since I've had that realization. So I've dissected it, many times over. And
Mhm.
I come back to the idea that I have that sort of lever in my head now to switch. So if I can go, whether on stage or, like you said, in a meeting or something like that, I get to talk with a lot of senior execs. I'm saying, okay, this is going to be exciting versus shit. What am I going to do? I've realized that it's like, at the end of the day, it's my whole mindset. It's like my ability to get past this, belief, or get past this sort of naysayer that says, oh yeah, I can't just talk myself into these wins, into these outcomes. Yeah, you can. Like,
Yeah,
you absolutely can. And it's this sort of, I don't really go along with the froofy part of it, but sort of, wild, talk yourself into $1 million thing. But I do think that we don't give enough credit to how powerful our mindset is.
absolutely. 100%. I think it is, like you said, let's use the word foofy, right? Like,
Yeah,
there are these concepts that are out there. And I think people hear them, but they don't lean into them. And because they
that's
don't
right.
lean into them, they never become a reality. So they stay in that foofy phase
Yeah,
versus what we try to teach and what I really lean into is, hey, sometimes you have to identify as like, I want to be this person over here. Joshua wants to be this amazing, energetic leader up on the stage. Well, you
Right.
can't do that unless you're taking certain actions. One, you got to get on the stage.
That's
Two,
right.
you're going to feel something. You got to lean into the right emotions to do that.
That's right.
Three, you're not going to be perfect the right time. So you know you're going to have to do this time and time and time again. You're going to have
Yep.
to practice. You're going to have to do those 100 pitches in front of the mirror by yourself before you get on the stage, right? There
That's right.
is the work, but I think we have to focus on where do we want, like, who do we want to be in our lives to then be able to lean into that floofiness and see it become a reality.
Yeah.
It's really easy just to negate things that are shared with us, right?
Yeah.
I did this in Hewlett Packard, right? When the big push was growth mindset, right? Which is
Mm.
funny because this is my business now,
Yeah.
but it's funny because it was like it went around and I was like, I don't buy into any of this stuff. Like,
Right.
but I wasn't applying it, right? And you have to at some point take personal responsibility. You have to say, these are the people I want to be around. This is the person I want to
Yeah.
be. This is how I need to be able to present myself, and then get started on that. And I think without that kind of end goal, that end vision of where you want to go, even a little bit, even just a direction to
Yeah.
start heading, you just kind of going back to the value statement that we talked a little bit earlier about. I just think that's where people lose a lot of that value of like, this isn't valuable. Well, you're not really pushing yourself and challenging yourself to do anything that creates more value that you can get behind to
That's
truly
right.
become obsessed with the direction that you're going or the projects
Yeah.
that you're working on.
Yeah. There's a lot in the power of what you were saying. I think the piece is I keep coming back to is that being brutally honest. If you're brutally honest with yourself and you ask yourself the hard questions and don't sort of pass them off. Don't sort of like, I don't want to do what he's doing or she's doing. I don't care to be a millionaire. I don't care to be whatever metric of success that you want to call. But if you're brutally honest, that there's things that you do want, that you do care about, that you wish you were spending more time on, that you absolutely should. And you need to be brutally honest of why you're not doing that.
Mhm.
And everybody has to wrestle with these. I haven't met anybody who isn't always doing everything that they want to do all the time. Like we're always battling in this realm of like, hey, am I spending enough time with the people that I care about, working on the projects I'm passionate about, spending enough time self care and doing things that make me feel good about myself and validating that that's a good thing to be doing. All of these things are just, again, problems of being brutally honest and the mindset that comes with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know we're running a little bit long on this topic, but we
Mm.
have to get to what I think is even more exciting for you, which is the AI piece. Because I believe
Mm.
you're almost known as like Mr. AI within Alteryx, or at least the front man for this. So, number one, what is Alteryx doing with AI? And two, what excites you about AI in the workplace? Because you hear a lot
Yeah.
of doom and gloom out there, if you will. It's going to
Yeah.
take jobs away. It's going to transform humanity as we know it. And maybe we'll do some of those things, but you thrive on energy, you thrive on positivity. So where's this going, Josh? Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more about your perspective of AI.
I like as far as Alteryx going, I think we've got something magical playing out. And the reason why is because if you understand anything about AI, it's a model. At its core. It's a mathematical model, and that model works based on one important thing, and that's data. Not just any data; it's clean, organized, data that has context to it, that has all the features and all the descriptions in it that allow the model to make decisions. That's what Alteryx does. Alteryx is really good at taking a bunch of different data sets, cleaning it up, doing all the sort of math on it, formulas, adding it together, joining it together, creating metrics, KPIs, getting rid of bad data, all of that stuff that needs to happen, even adding context, and then being able to put that into an AI model. And that's sort of the tail that wags the dog because you look at any of these AI models that are out there, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, name your flavor, even Copilot with Microsoft, they all work off of enormous amounts of data. That's the magic behind them. The magic is that they've acquired and accumulated vast amounts of data to be
Mhm.
as good as they are. And so Alteryx is in that space of cleaning and connecting data. As far as AI goes, it's really interesting. I had the funniest thing happen to me not too recently. I was coming out of my apartment, and this new neighbor came by, and she, introducing herself, saying hi. First thing she came out of her mouth, she's like, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I work in the AI space." And she was like, Artificial intelligence?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "I don't like you already." And then she walked away.
Really?
Well, like, I sat there, I thought it was hilarious, but then I
Yeah.
thought sat there and I really understood the sort of conundrum that people have,
Yeah.
that they choose. Now, you juxtapose that with one of my guests on the podcast is gonna be a cardiologist who can talk about the benefits of AI in medicine, and
Mhm.
how it literally improves the patient's sort of outcomes, but literally saving lives. Like, people are living longer, better, more productive lives with
Mhm.
this technology. Yeah, there's some challenges, but there's challenges to everything.
Mhm.
Automobiles. You take automobiles. Can they take a life? Sure can. Can they
Mhm.
get you to go see your family, or take you to places you've never been, and explore sort of the beauty of a place?
Mhm.
Absolutely can, right?
Yeah.
There's these trade-offs all the time. And I don't propose that I know all of those trade-offs, or all the I sort of have a rough idea about them. But there is an immense undiscovered amount of positive potential to AI, what it can do. It's already transforming people's lives, their health. It's the creativity, the business outcomes. I mean, everywhere you see it, it's impacting the way we're changing. And I think that's the part that gets me most excited, gets me most sort of amped up about AI, is the fact that it's so pervasive.
Mhm.
It has the potential to improve every aspect of the world in which we live in.
Mhm. Why do you think there's such a fear for AI? I almost think about
Mm.
this, not to get too political, but I almost think that
Yeah,
there's large propaganda machines working
sure.
against like the gloom piece of it, right? Already
Yeah.
wrap your minds around the negative things that can come, right? So the
Mhm.
story you just provided about your new neighbor,
Yeah.
right? One, I mean, she just sounds like she doesn't have a growth mindset, just simply telling somebody she doesn't like you because of your business
Right.
title. Two, I do think that there is a reality for a lot of people around complex systems, right? That they don't know. And right. And
Sure.
you are the guy that is in the middle of that, right? Like you
Mhm.
started the podcast out saying, like, you're kind of between the executives and the team. You're taking this big vision and helping communicate this in more layman's terms or more understandable terms, taking the complex and making it simple. That's not done that often in the world, specifically with AI, where there's
Yeah,
this maybe learning curve that has to take place for a lot of people.
that's
Is
right.
that the type of fear base that you see, or is it something else?
I would really challenge those who their only sort of game plan or conversation piece is that I can't stand AI, it's going to ruin the world. I would love for them to take a perspective that is more balanced. I think extremes on both end. I think in all of life and humanity is a problem. I'm very much, in line with the sort of middle way, my Buddhist beliefs, but like the middle way is really probably the better place to play, because if you have people that are going forth with AI and implementing AI with no boundaries, no guardrails, no sense of security or governance or safety, that's
Mhm.
probably not great either. But there's, the others who, and this in society, it's not AI, it's how people are sort of brought forward, that they need a problem to rally around, right? They need some sort of perspective on doom and gloom, and that, like, everything is terrible. And they don't really challenge themselves to be like, well, did did somebody live longer today because AI was around? Did somebody get their next job because of the ability to, apply to more places? I mean, we could go on forever of
Mhm.
all the sort of positive aspects. Is there negative aspects? There absolutely is, and you'd be sort of ridiculous to think that there's not. But it's not a tilted sort of perspective. It's all, we have to be act and be as smart as we really are as humans, and be able to hold, competing ideas, right? This idea that, like, hey, it could really impact millions of people's of lives. Kids are gonna be healthier if we do this correctly. I really say this in the mindset or the sort of call to people is challenge them to be part of that side. Be part of the side that says that leans in, like we were saying, engage and make a difference. Don't necessarily be the ones that are like, oh, I got a new tool I can make free money with. Like
Yeah.
there's a good portion of people that are doing that, but like I'm
Right.
saying, like you have the power with AI to take an idea of finding water sources in remote destinations, finding ways to feed the hungry, to help less people become sick. There's a lot of positive humanitarian benefits
Mhm.
to the use of AI that people could lean into. Versus, I have a couple of friends that are really great, you know, cybersecurity experts. And they're looking to try to, they spend their days and nights finding ways to mitigate the sort of negative aspects. Like, hey, how do we address this? How do we handle this situation, that situation? They're great at that, but they're sort of leaning in and trying to mitigate the negative parts of it. I
Yeah.
think is, there's so much opportunity here. That the biggest challenge with AI is change. I think anybody who's been in a career longer than say 4 or 5 years know that change is a constant especially in a corporate environment, but I would say any type of organization in the world,
Yeah.
change is going to be there. AI sort of age at Alteryx, we call it the sort of intelligence age. It's going to be a massive amount of change in a short amount of time. And so I completely validate and understand that this gives a lot of people challenges that they've never had to go up against before.
Yeah, which can be scary, and I think that's very
Yeah.
true. But it's also coming, and when I tell people, I mean, I tell my
Right.
mom, you can't run away from it. It is coming,
Yeah.
and it's going to
Yeah.
impact your life. And so the best thing you can do, again, we have a choice. We can run and hide, or we can lean in a little bit. And
That's right.
I choose to tell people lean in. It's almost like building a new habit, or let's say quitting smoking. Like it's rare people can quit smoking just cold turkey and be done with it
That's
for
right.
life, right? You have to chip away at it a little bit at a time. You have to go
That's right.
get the nicotine gum, or you have to, maybe you go for a week without it, and then, have a couple
Yeah.
cigarettes, and then, stop again for a couple of weeks and get, continuously prolong how long you're not smoking. Probably a bad example. But the point is, right, you have to really lean into it. And it's
Yep.
it's like anything else. You just have to start
Yep.
before you can really understand what that change means, how it might impact you, and what you can do with it. And so with that said, what would you recommend, maybe two things that people can do just specifically with AI right now if they're not
Yeah.
familiar with it at all, just to get started, just to lean in a little bit?
Yeah. Find one of them. You're gonna have to lean in. Find an LLM that ChatGPT, Gemini, uh, probably two best choices. Claude, if you're technically inclined, get us a monthly subscription. It's $20, and just start using it every day. Like, do something little, create a fun little picture, make yourself laugh, use it every day. And then over time, keep doing more and more and more. And
Mhm.
you will be amazed at how far and how fast you come, because you need to get into that mindset of what it means to work with an LLM model, what it means to prompt. Prompt is writing a command to the model, and what you get back. And you sort of got to build this awareness of that this thing exists. It's really extremely powerful. Companies, organizations, and experts are already miles down the road. They're
Mhm.
having what we call agents do this stuff.
Mhm.
Other computers that are doing this work. If you're not familiar with it, getting started, just get in there. But there's a wealth of resources across the world and the web that can help teach you. But get your hands dirty.
Yeah, absolutely. For what it's worth, to the audience, for anybody listening, I've committed to an hour a week.
Yep.
Everybody can find an hour, I think, somewhere along the line, whether that's, 10 minutes a day,
Yeah.
whether that's, half an hour here, half an hour there, but really just dive in, start playing with things. There's a ton of different tools. In fact, I mean,
Yeah.
there's an AI tool for everything. I
There
sent
really
one
is.
last night to my wife which helps. She has a friend who's writing a book, and it's just
Mhm.
like this AI model creates little prompts for you to answer so it can help kind of guide you along the way. It doesn't mean it has to
Perfect.
do the writing for you, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you're going to type on a computer anyways, and you can maybe talk to it, right? Tell it a story so that you don't have to type if you're not great at typing. If you get stuck on a character or something like that, it can really help you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there are, we can, as you said, go all day and night about how many negative things there are. But if we focus on the positive, we can also go all day and night
That's
on
right.
all the positives that are coming out of it. And you have to choose like which way you want to lean, and
Yeah.
it's coming no matter what. So you might as well start to learn, start to educate yourself, get yourself further down the line than you would have been if you just ran into the corner and hit.
That's right. The other thing I would add is sort of the second part of it is sort of look at the things in your personal life that don't get you excited, that don't drive you, that don't, that make your life harder, but you know that you have to do, and start to think about how could a system or AI take over that thing. You could literally prompt the LLM saying, "Hey, I'm doing this thing 1 hour every week. I effing hate it. I self-edited myself, but like this thing drives me nuts. Give me 5 ideas on how I could, automate this thing with AI." And I say this because there's a thing that happens with people that are just getting started with AI. They sort of do the pictures, they, create the images that seem to be unbelievable. They you know, rewrite a script or something like that. But then they sort of stall out. And I had it happen with myself, a couple of years ago when ChatGPT first came out. But I see a lot of people do it is they get to a point where they've sort of tested all the whiz bang stuff and the cool stuff. But
Yeah.
then when it comes to automating work and getting stuff off of our plates, they sort of have either a psychological conundrum where they're like, "Oh my god, I don't. If it automates everything I do, what am I going to do?" Like that sort of thing. Wrestle with it, like deal with it. You like deal with it, not like get over it, but deal with it, like figure it out in your head what it means to do this. But more so, use AI to positively impact your life. If you want to do something, hypothetically, you have a newsletter that you send out to all your friends or your acquaintances that really drives a lot of positive impact for you. Look at AI, see how AI could help you do that more effective, efficiently. If you like to travel around the world, maybe you're retired or maybe you just like to take time off, start to think about hey, how AI can help improve your trip and your travel and everything from can it find you better price tickets to can it elucidate you on those places so that you get to be less of a tourist and more like a local. These are all things that we sort of we think that it has to be a business application, but really AI has the power to positively benefit our lives.
Absolutely, 100%. And I know we're running a bit long on time, so I
Sure.
kind of want to wrap it up here. But this has just been awesome, Joshua. I greatly appreciate your time. I feel like
Yes,
you and I could just hammer on this stuff all day long.
probably.
But with that said, where can people find you if they want to, if they're interested in Alteryx, if they're interested in the AI work that you're doing, or just want to get in touch with you in general?
Yeah, so Alteryx is Alteryx.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn. If you just look up Joshua Burkhow, I should be the only one that I know of. Feel free to connect with me, follow. More than happy to chat further about this.
This is awesome. And we will definitely take Joshua and Alteryx in our anything that we post, all the videos, and social
Perfect.
media posts, all that good stuff. So you'll be able to just to click on him and find him that way. Joshua, thank you again. This is incredible. To the audience,
My
thank you for
pleasure.
listening. Hopefully you took something away from this and really make the choice, make the positive choice for yourself. And if you take away anything from this video, I would say go back, listen to the whole thing, but most importantly, listen to the end there and where Joshua said that you can into AI. If you're not experienced with it, if you're just learning, just starting out, take up a couple easy tasks, do something every day or at least an hour a week and really get used to it to educate yourself, to make it not so scary, but then also realize there's a lot more potential in you than you probably realize. You just have to get a little creative with it. So with
Great.
that, we'll wrap it up there. And Joshua, I'm sure you and I will talk again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you so
All
much for
right. Thank you,
having me.
sir.
Appreciate it.